we're gonna need that there anyway, so.
You already have money allocated for that though, right?
Not all of it. I mean, we have $1 million, grant we're getting for that. We have $1 million put aside for that. But the rescues, we didn't get a new rescue yet. And, there's gonna be a lot of equipment and we're gonna have to hire additional personnel. So the plan B would be to expand EMS. Well, would be to put the funds towards the expanded EMS, is a better way to term it.
I think we all agree we don't want to leave any money on the table for
None will be
ARPA
left.
funds, so.
We'll
thank
spend every
you.
dollar.
Those sound good. Those sound good, Plan Bs.
It may also be that we need to rethink the parameters for the program if the business owners still can't put together a proposal that's acceptable. But if you come in with 8, I think the idea that you just said about having a phase 2 makes a lot of sense.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, what we talked about in a potential phase 2 is changing some of the parameters where you may have someone who has a wonderful idea and just doesn't know how to bring that idea to fruition, that the grant program would be more cradle to finish, so that you would really work with individual business owners to bring something to fruition, including services, construction management, and everything, versus just putting it out to a bid and response.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. We got another one, right, Jim?
Yes, the director will also brief us on the hazard mitigation plan.
I think you just had a motion. I'm not sure you all voted.
You already got it. We passed it. Did we pass it? All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All right, that passes.
Thank you, Rory. With regards to the emergency management study, we have signed a contract with Beta Group. We are looking to have a kickoff meeting on July 19th with our subcommittee of department heads and involved parties, primarily led by the chief as well as our department. So that is fully funded. We continue to make reports to REMA associated with that, so they understand the time lag that has occurred, and they are working with us on that. Again, that is a capital outlay by the town, reimbursed by the state through that program. So it's a $50,000. It was initially a $50,000 program. Actually, Beta was gracious enough to reduce their contract to $45,000, where we were doing $5,000 of in-kind. So there is no additional financial outlay of an actual check to anyone for that project. So that is in the process of moving forward. Again, there's a web page will be up and running shortly. We'll have public input, questionnaires, surveys that'll be coming forward, and we'll do that through the town manager's updates. So.
All right.
My question to the manager was about the fact, when this came in front of us in February, there's a 5-year period for rewriting or updating the plan, and we were told 6 months, and I was just concerned that we're bumping up against that deadline.
Yep. So again, as I mentioned, working with REMA, we are not the only town of 31 municipalities in Rhode Island who are under the same item with regards to financing, hiring a consultant, and doing it by that deadline. So again, they are working with us, and I'll seek their guidance on what we do if there's anything we can do with the formal lag or any action that needs to be taken by council.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Jamie? All right. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions for Jim. So, not for you, Jamie. Thank you. Sorry. Jim, a couple things. I saw for everyone in the community that there's a composting program on July 29th from 5 to 6 here. So I just want to say it out loud for anyone who's paying attention and watching. If you register for the program, you get the first 100 people get a composting bin. So that's July 29th. Just want to make sure people say that. That's fantastic. Thank you to Bonnie. Is it Bonnie Blair? recycling person? Thank you, whoever did this all.
There's been a bunch of people working
Yeah.
on it. The Sustainability Committee had a lot to do with this as well.
So that's great. So I'm super excited. I saw that on the town webpage. I wanted to ask you in the future about the community medicine program that we talked about last week, you and I did. If I didn't know it was up and running, and probably many people in the community don't know what it is and who might be able to utilize it. So at a future meeting, for 5 or 10 minutes, could Craig come, because I know he's not here tonight, could he just come and just talk about what that program provides to our community?
Yes, so that's been a slow roll of a start. It hasn't been like a hard date we started, and so what you're talking about, and you and I talked about it because you called about someone who reached out to you and needed assistance. So one of the things, Craig Stanley, he has a vast knowledge in EMS. He came from Atlanta, Georgia. He's from Rhode Island, but he moved down there for 30 years. He had a very large role in EMS down in Atlanta, came back here, and he's excellent. He really runs a very good department. But he came up with a concept, really forward-thinking, about a community paramedic that could assist. The goal is to keep people out of the hospitals, out of the emergency rooms, best they can, not guaranteed. And if there's a resident that needs something that can be done by a paramedic, they go to the house to take a blood pressure check, or just, not like a traveling doctor, but something that would keep them from having to go to a hospital or an emergency room. But that's the program he started in late fall. It's moving, now that we have additional personnel on, it's starting to get ramped up. But I would agree with you that that is a program that we should put out to the community. Yeah, I'm going to talk to Craig about it this week, and we'll get him to brief us on it.
But we don't, I'm just speaking, we don't need a half an hour presentation. I just want,
We could
a
put it
mini
on the
commercial.
Manager's report, future meeting, we'll have him come up.
Yeah, just like add it to them. Thank you, Rory. That's good. Just at some point, because I think people don't understand what it is and whether it was appropriate for the resident that I was in touch with or not, I'm not sure. But I would like to just make sure that everyone in town knows it, because it was great. Also, someone also asked me about, we don't charge if South Kingstown residents when they use the rescue. One of my residents asked me that same question. We don't charge.
We don't.
Right? So,
We don't.
saying it for the community.
One last thought on EMS. Anytime I've called there to ask questions about this or ask for assistance or anything, I've never gotten a no. It's always, yeah, we can do that.
Yep.
And so that's a hats off to them.
Yep.
There's 20 of them. They work very hard. And we are working very hard to get them where they need to be, with the union contract that we brought in an executive session. But that is a good idea. I'll get Craig Stanley to come, and we'll talk more about that.
And the last thing I have is the tax bills went out last week, and the short-term rental extra page was attached. But I'm just curious, does everybody get a tax bill? Because if you escrow your taxes, do you still get that bill? And so would everyone know about the SCR registry?
Yeah, I don't know if Wendy's still here, but she left. Everyone gets a tax bill. Whether you prepay your taxes or put it in escrow or whatever, you get a tax bill.
I think mine goes my bank.
To the bank?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it does when there is an escrow. You're right.
So I've had a mortgage previously where I didn't escrow the taxes. This was probably years ago. But, so I got my tax bill. I'm just curious, if I didn't have that tax bill, how would I know to register my STR? I don't have one, but just,
Well, that's a whole nother subject. I mean, that was just one tool to make
Yep.
people aware of short-term rentals. We have others that we're working on. So
Right.
whether it's the tax bill or not, I would say the vast majority of people are getting tax bills. We got a ton of calls this morning. They went out on July 5th, and people were standing in line asking questions and calling on them. But that's a good point. If not everyone's getting it, then we got to figure out another way to get them the short-term rental.
so I would definitely think about using the website and social media on that one, because I got a tax bill, but I just didn't know if, it gets sent to your bank. You guys are saying it's sent to your bank. So that's one thing. The other thing about the tax bills I noticed, which I think is new, is that you can do an automatic debit to the tax bill, you can set that up when Emily's not here. No one gets a am I the only one who gets a tax bill?
No, we get
Okay. So did you see on that you can do the ACE with your bank, so it can direct debit?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out, because a lot of people forget and pay late, and then we had all that angst with people missing the deadlines, that you can also do an automatic payment for your taxes. Is that new?
I don't know
No,
if that,
you're
I
saying
don't, I don't
that's
know
not
if
new?
that's new, but the number of people that
Seem new.
fail to make a payment is very small,
Okay.
actually. But these are all suggestions I'll make to them and put it out there.
I did not know that you could direct debit to the town to pay the taxes. A lot of people walk the check in, a lot of
A
people,
lot of people walking in.
so I just want to raise awareness on that. Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on now to item 10, public comments, formerly known as comments from interested citizens. At this point, I invite anyone who wishes to speak on anything whatsoever, come on up to the podium. We just ask that you introduce yourself. We're going to limit you to 5 minutes, and that clock's going to begin counting down. Once you begin speaking, it's a good way to sort of pace yourself. So with that said, first come, first serve. Come on up. Bob, you coming up?
Carl, Jim.
Bob Traeger, Succotash Road. I've already told you a number of times why I come to the meetings, and inclusion was very important to me and was even brought up by one of the speakers. Inclusion, exclusion, inclusion. Make sure we get that inclusion in everything we do. I listened to some unbelievable presentations today. This is an education for me at 84, an old fart. But I was out fishing this morning. I've had an interesting day. I haven't stopped all day. I wonder if I could make it over here, but I decided this is an important place to go. I've already decided that a long time ago. Well, the word that comes to mind today for me, that what I feel was enhanced today again, is the word trust. I think we're all searching to trust as much as we can. And trust is a very fragile situation in this country right now, I think, generally. Who and what do we trust, and what is going to happen in the next few months is beyond a few minutes of dialogue. I've had a lot of dialogue about it, though, with people and whatever, and I'm not going to bring it up now. But except the main thing is that at this meeting, there were a couple of gentlemen that spoke here. I thought that gave presentations that made me trust that the situation with the $150 million expansion or new school we're developing here is going to be done well and correctly. And that's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling because the fact is that money, that's a lot of money. And it sounds, the more, I listened to the presentation, one of the gentlemen before that I thought was one of the best explanations of that type of a job and all the things that it includes, and he did it again tonight. He's unbelievable. And believe me, what I am really sure of now more than ever, that artificial intelligence is never going to take the place of the human mind, because I don't think anybody could have all that stuff, and be able to respond to questions that are very complex. To be able to even try to answer some of these questions it's almost impossible. So some people have that unbelievable ability, and they have an unbelievable mind to do it. And so trust is the big one today from the meeting that I got, that I'm glad I came again. And I think it was very good. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Jim O'Neill, Wakefield. Yeah, there was a lot of good news tonight. Things are moving very quickly with the high school, which brings me back to the vote a couple months ago. I wish we had moved just as quickly for tax relief for the people that are going to be looking at the principal and interest costs on this 20-year bond. I don't understand why we didn't move in the middle of May. Maybe I should have screamed louder, between President McEntee and myself, we started, 6 years ago, thinking about some form of the Homestead Act, and 2 years ago, the same. I speak about this and other ways to save money almost every time I'm up here. And very, very disconcerting that we don't have something for fiscal year 25, that now we're going to have to wait for fiscal year 26. And that's the reason I brought up the Block Island newspaper report. I mean, of all places that have housing problems, it's Block Island, with well more than 50% of their homes being sold out of staters, both rental purposes, appreciation purposes, you name it. But it creates a huge problem with the rental issues. But they're moving forward with the 20% assessment reduction, which I brought up to you. They admit they're going to have to adjust yearly with new housing rules and regs and how to adjust it. But they had to make a move on behalf of the taxpayers who were just being pulled up tax-wise, cost-wise to live out there, with the money being paid for the properties out there. I don't have to tell you that their average price is well over $1 million, so it's a phenomenal problem. And with that in mind, I wanted to bring up something quickly here to you. Providence. Providence just completed their budget, and they're going to drop the Homestead Act. Instead, they're going to a basis of tax rates. But just to give you an idea here, on a $460,000 home, which we talk about all the time, they're going to have a tax rate of $10.50. Non-owner, almost double the price, $18.50. Basically, the difference is $4,000 between $4,800 annually and the non-owner, $8,400. Their commercial rates in Providence are up to $35 now. And the people I've talked to up there are really beginning to believe that with all the rentals going up there, the rentals, the non-owner rental situation is becoming more of a commercial situation, where the town, obviously, they make pilot programs with Brown and Brisbane, all the schools, and they're thinking of having to do this with the huge rental market for those schools that's represented up there. Huge, huge business. And lastly, I wanted to, I always give you some warnings here, but from the town archives, I wanted to show you how fortunate a lot of the real estate owners are who do have properties to rent out. Great cash flow and appreciation with markets like we've had the last 5-8 years here in South Kingstown, the state of Rhode Island. And the poor sole owner who's owner-occupied home, well, they take advantage of appreciation, but they don't have those write-offs. They don't have the cash flow when the market turns. And markets do turn. I just wanted to give you a couple numbers from the town's archives here, if you'd bear with me here. This is from the assessed values and actual values of taxable property for the town of South Kingstown. I'm going to give you two dates. In 2010, residential property in the town of South Kingstown was $5.2 billion. That's when the market absolutely was right in the middle of an incredible drop. 5 years later, 2015, is $3.6 billion, almost down a third. Now, the assessed value in those same two periods were still about $5.2 million for residential, but the assessed values were still above $4 billion, $4.3 billion, so only about 20% down. But I wanted to give you these numbers to show you because the assessed values at the time included the motor vehicles, tangible personal property taxes that were well over $300 million in total. But markets do fall, and taxes will not drop. Even back in my day, 2011, 12, and 13, we had 2 years of flat from both the town and the schools, and 0.1% up in that third year. I mean, people were hurting. So this is why there's a huge advantage for the real estate investor here versus the poor person who's just own an occupied home trying to survive. So hopefully you'll keep that in mind, and hopefully we will see a tax relief coming here quickly here, because of the way the high school's moving, we're going to see that very quickly here. 2027 is a date that we may open. So hopefully that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Oh, geez,
Hi, I'm Bill McCusker from Friends of the Saugatucket. Old guy comments come in threes, so I'll be the last old guy to talk. Just want to give you an update. I'm sure you all know that the hydrolytic treatment began in Indian Lake. In fact, on the 10th will be its second treatment. I'm sure you know that there's a series of 6 treatments. I did want to tell you that Fresh Meadow Brook is the brook that leaves Indian Lake, that goes into the Saugatucket, and hydrola has been found in that. I found it myself. I reported to Katie DeGoosh from DEM. Be interesting to see if this hydrola that's in Fresh Meadow Brook will be affected by the treatment in Indian Lake. It'll be, time will tell. There is hydrola, an abundance of hydrola at the dam at the village of Indian Lake, if anyone's interested in seeing what it looks like, and hopefully we're starting to see it decay. So just want you to know that we're keeping our eyes on it. We have volunteers in Saugatucket Pond looking for hydrola. We're looking for more volunteers to go out throughout the watershed, California Gyms, Asa Pond, all those other ponds, to see whether or not there's any hydrola, if there's more of it's widespread than we think. So that's it. Any questions?
Thank you for all your hard work there, because it's not an easy one to fight, that hydrola.
Eventually, someday, we're going to have to discuss treatment of the invasive plants right down here on Main Street. All that invasive growth is slowing down the flow of the river. It's also collecting contaminants, making the bacteria rates grow, warming the water. Someday, and if hydrola ever shows up down at Main Street, it'd be in the best interest to find some way to treat all the invasives. You have fanwort, you have milfoil that's already there. You'll see it all spread out. That shouldn't be there. Add hydrola into the mix, and it's going to be a mess from our view on Main Street. So.
Hopefully the natural resource officer can look to see if there are any grants to try to treat that, because I
Right.
agree with you.
Right. And with his efforts, we've got a lot going on at Indian Lake right now. So
Yes.
thank you.
Where did you say you found it?
I'm sorry?
Where did you say you found it?
Fresh Meadow Brook. Fresh Meadow Brook is the brook that leaves Indian Lake and goes to the Saugatucket. It goes underneath Broad Rock Road into the Saugatucket. It's kind of expected to see something there. You walk down probably 100 feet. And again, Katie from DEM, she is the aquatic invasive species biologist for the state, was alerted on this. So I'm curious to see as the hydrola dies in Indian Lake, and it will, to see whether or not it dies in the brook. That'd be an indication that it could possibly be treated before it gets into the Saugatucket, if it's not there already.
Thank you for letting DEM know.
Thank you, Bill.
Good evening, Doral Beasley. 90 years ago, the Democratic Party in Rhode Island wrested control of the Senate and House from the Republicans. Over the years since, we've had an occasional representative or the U.S. Senate or the governorship. But Rhode Island's state government has been a one-party operation ever since 1934. This hasn't been the case, though, in South Kingstown. Our town council has had numerous changes in party leadership over the years. However, that ended in 1996 when the last Republican Party relinquished control of the town council to candidates backed by the South Kingstown Democratic Town Committee. So how has South Kingstown fared over the last 28 years? Well, if you pay property taxes, the answer is pretty easy: poorly. It began 18 months in the 18 months leading up to the opening of Broad Rock Middle School in September 2001, when 100 people were hired to run a school that required only 70 people. The problem is we've carried those 30 people on the books ever since. If the South Kingstown Democratic Town Committee is successful again in electing hand-picked candidates to our town council on November 5th, voters will have to wait until 2026 to get another shot at ending our now 3-decade monopoly of power. They will also lose what may be the last chance to lower their property taxes over the next 3 years by finally funding our school district on a per-pupil basis as allowed by Rhode Island general law. Since my unsuccessful attempt to run for South Kingstown Town Council seat in 2020, I've attended more council, school committee, school building committee meetings than any resident in town that I know of. What have I witnessed? Well, mistruths, half-truths about why funding our school district on a per-pupil basis is illegal or would harm students. I'm tired of the annual dog and pony show where the council majority whittles down the expected tax rate increase by reducing spending on the municipal side of the ledger instead of reducing the property tax transfer to the school district. I'm tired of having the president of this council and public comment if and when he doesn't like what's being said at this podium, as he did 2 weeks ago. That's why I'm an independent candidate for the town council on November 5th. I had no intention, this is the God's honest truth, I had no intention to ever run again for the town council until 2 weeks ago, when you shut me down. When I left here that night, I knew I had to do it again. So I got one other question, totally unrelated. So I drove by the new EMT station in Matunic there, and I was wondering why there's, on the sides of the building, real plywood, but on the roof, it's particle board. I would think if you're looking for a long-term viability of the station, which I'm sure you are, you'd have plywood on the roof, not particle board.
Thank you, Doral.
Doral, I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you came back, and you can come back to the microphone if you want, because last meeting, I was kind of shocked at the whole thing, and I regret that I didn't speak up and advocate for any member of the public to be treated with respect. So I want you to know that I didn't like that, and I feel like anyone who gets up here and speaks, takes the time to come to the meeting, deserves 5 minutes of respect, doesn't need to be cut off and shut down, and I regret that that's the way you were treated, and so I'm glad that you're back, and I will do a better job of advocating for every person here to be treated with respect that comes and speaks for 5 minutes, and I want you to come back and share your ideas, because you're right, you do come all the time, you go to all the other meetings, you pay attention and you care, and although you might have different ideas, I don't agree with all of them anyway all the time, but I do think you deserve kindness and respect for coming to the microphone and not being treated that way. So I apologize for not reacting in the moment 2 weeks ago for you.
Thank you, I appreciate those words.
All right. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak? All right, we're now going to move on to communications. Item 11A is an email dated June 26, 2024 from Elise Torello concerning the effects on the town's ordinances of recently enacted House Bill H7382 Sub A, an act relating to cities and towns zoning ordinances governing the number of unrelated people living together in a household. Elise, come on up. And there's a lot of legal implications here, obviously, so we'll let you speak here, and then I'm sure a lot of your questions we can go to our solicitor here.
Hi, yes, Elise Torello. I live at 2625D Commodore Perry Highway. I've been up here a bunch of times in the last, I guess, 6 months or more, with concerns about the short-term rental that is directly next door. I'll try to be brief. It's a very narrow one-lane private road, very large house, kind of a strange lot. It was loaded up with URI students and is currently being rented as a short-term Airbnb. It's advertised as 8 bedrooms, 16 plus people, even though it only has 5 legal bedrooms at this point due to egress windows and emergency lighting and other issues. We have an ordinance on the books that for more than 3 unrelated people living in a household, they are supposed to get a special use permit, go through development plan review and get a special use permit prior to the building being rented. That did not happen. There were other code issues. They didn't have a well. They were taking the drinking water from freshwater pond and whatnot. None of this was being enforced. Fast forward to the last session of the General Assembly, and they passed, as I stated in my email, and I don't want to stand here and read the email, but the legislation was so strangely worded that I honestly don't know what it says. And I was hoping that the town's legal counsel had looked at the wording and could maybe clarify whether this law nullifies our ordinance or our ordinance is fine, or we don't know what the law really says. So I was really hoping for some clarification, and also to advocate for us as a town relooking at this ordinance anyway and maybe tightening up the language and getting ahead of this as we did in writing this ordinance in the first place, which, you know, I think that the town does a really great job at getting out ahead of things like, you know, solar siting and, you know, this rental ordinance. So, so anyway, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
All right, Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to step back a little bit, this bill was enacted June 24th, so that's when it became effective. It was not part of the Speaker's housing package, but the Zoning Enabling Act for decades has allowed municipalities to set limits on how many unrelated people can live together. Because in one single family dwelling, we have to allow family members to live together. We can't, you know, if it's a large family, they have a fundamental right to live together. We can limit how many unrelated people can live together in one household. And so previously, the state said municipalities could set the number of unrelated persons that could live together, but that minimum, that the maximum shall not be less than 3. So most towns in Rhode Island have on-the-book zoning ordinances that allow 3, 4, and there may be 1 or 2 that allow 5 maximum unrelated persons. This law, which just became effective, it supersedes all zoning ordinances in Rhode Island. It sets both a floor and a ceiling on how many unrelated people can live together. So now it states, and I'll read it, the maximum number may be set by local ordinance, but this maximum shall not be less than 1 person per bedroom and shall not exceed 5 unrelated persons per dwelling. My opinion of that is we have to allow a minimum of 1 per bedroom up to a maximum of 5 unrelated persons. As an example, under the old law for a 2-bedroom dwelling, 3 unrelated persons could reside together in that 2-bedroom dwelling. The new law would allow us to set that limit at 2, right? 1 per bedroom. For a 5-bedroom house, the old law would only allow 3 unrelated persons per dwelling. And we did have, as Ms. Torello indicated, the option for a special use permit to exceed that number, which was not required under state law. For the 5-bedroom house under the new law, 5 unrelated people would be allowed to live together by right with no permission from the town. That application that Ms. Torello referenced is currently pending before the zoning board. It hasn't come before the zoning board yet for a hearing, but I believe it's scheduled for this month, July 17th. So to the extent, and it had been in the pipeline and I believe had received advisory development plan review from the planning board, to the extent that the town is seeking to enforce what's on the books, our 3-person limit, that's been superseded. So Ms. Torello's email referenced an urgency for the town to review these new laws and amend our ordinance and regulations accordingly. And I'm not even sure if the planning board has reviewed the memo that we distributed to you at the last meeting, but our office will work with planning staff on making all the necessary amendments. About half of the land use related bills will require an amendment to the zoning ordinance and or subdivision regulations. So at this point, there's no necessary urgency to act because the state has superseded what we have on the books.
So I have a bunch of questions you want to add. Should we add it to the agenda, add this item to the agenda? Or is it
If it's related, we could probably just talk about it.
Okay. So to go back, so this is a 5-bedroom house that they want to have 8 people, use 8. So would they be able, so they're all set with 5. They don't have to get a special use permit. They could stop. But they're technically wanting to pursue all the way up to 8.
If they want 8 unrelated people to live together, that, in my opinion, they can still go before the zoning board, and that special use permit that we have still applies, but we don't have the discretion anymore to limit it below 5.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm not so sure about that because the way it's worded is maximum number may be set by local ordinance, but this maximum shall not be less than 1 person per bedroom and shall not exceed 5 unrelated persons per dwelling.
Yep.
So shall not exceed? It doesn't say it can't be less than that. It says it can't exceed that. And with that "and" there, to me, both conditions have to be met. Like, if that were "or," then either one could be met, right? But with an "and," 1 person per bedroom and shall not exceed 5. So not less than 5, shall not exceed 5. So it could be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5.
So I think that because the town has already a special use permit option for a property owner to allow more than 3 unrelated people to live together, and again, now we have to read it and interpret it as more than 5, because we've made that option available, my advice to the zoning board would be to hear the application. I think the zoning board can review the application, and I'll advise them they have the discretion to allow more than 5 unrelated people to live together because we have that option in our zoning ordinance. If the council wishes to eliminate that option for the special use permit, then the limit will be just what I read to you, what's on state law. No less than 1 person per dwelling, up to 5. We don't need to allow a special use permit to exceed that number.
So there's nothing in the law here that prevents us from granting a special use permit to increase beyond 5 per bedroom For example, as you just discussed, if there is a house with 8 bedrooms, as of now, state law limits that to be 5 unrelated persons, even though there's 8 bedrooms. But based on a special use permit that we have the authority to grant, the town does, they can increase it up to as many as they get approval for?
So, yeah, I mean, I think the special use permit option was put in place to give flexibility for 4, maybe 5. I'm not sure anyone has come to the zoning board seeking more than that. But now that the floor has been bumped up to 5 by state law, the council may well decide to eliminate that option, and you'll get advice from the planning board at some point after the planning board and planning staff and legal counsel have had a chance to make recommendations.
But meanwhile, this project is in a different line, so very well, the zoning board could approve it. And then they would be grandfathered in even if we no longer allowed special use permits to exceed 5. You know, we don't have that process for this one, right? So they could go forward regardless of anything.
Yes.
How would we communicate any concerns about that? Because this is not Ms. Trello's first time here talking about this house. The water thing skeeves me out, and I don't even use the word skeeve ever, but it just creeps me out that they could be drinking water from a freshwater pond and people have no idea that they're doing it. So how do we pursue some of these concerns?
For the council to comment on a pending zoning application, I'd want to have an internal consultation with our office because that's not typical in my experience.
Okay. And what about the concerns about the water? Do we just keep,
They've got a well now.
they have a well now?
They dug a well.
Okay.
But I'm still confused how not to exceed 5 makes 5 a floor.
I've simply offered my opinion on what this law means. We don't have a judicial interpretation yet. It's brand new. The ink is just about dry. The speaker's housing package was introduced with the stated purpose of increasing availability of housing. This seems to be along those lines, but again, you can see that there was a give and take. So there's now both a floor and a ceiling in state law for the number of unrelated persons who can live together. I do think municipalities still have the option to allow more than that by relief, as we have chosen to establish with the special use permit option. That is not required going forward. It was on the books now. The applicant submitted an application according to what was in effect at that time, and the hearing hasn't started, but the advice I'll be giving to the zoning board is consistent with what I've told you tonight.
Let me ask you this, Amy. Why is it that the explicit language of the bill says that cannot exceed 5 unrelated persons in a household? Makes no mention of a special use permit to increase that amount beyond 5, but yet you still believe that we have the ability to offer a special use permit increasing beyond 5?
So when we adopted the special use permit option in, I want to say 2017, but I could be off on that. The state law said nothing about a special use permit. So that section of the Zoning Enabling Act has never explicitly said municipalities may choose to allow occupancy by more than X number of unrelated individuals by special use permit. In my opinion, it was consistent with our authority under the Zoning Enabling Act at that time. I think it's still consistent now.
There's been nothing in the bill that would preempt our ability to do it because we've been doing it for so long and it hasn't been challenged, and there's nothing that addresses it here?
Right. No one has ever challenged our ability to that special use permit provision. We have specific and objective criteria, and we had that actually before state law was amended last year to further clarify that special use permits need to be granted on specific and objective criteria.
All right. So there's nothing in the bill that preempts our ability to issue a special use permit to increase it beyond 5. That's what you're saying?
In my opinion, no. There's nothing in the bill that limits our ability to do that.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to circle back to something that, Elise, you said. I think regarding that it was originally a 5-bedroom house that has suddenly become an 8-bedroom, but there's some issues with the legality of those extra 3 bedrooms. So I'd be interested in hearing more about that, because that, if it's not a legal bedroom, then I think that that pretty much, for me, would be a deciding factor. But, so can you tell us about why they're not legal bedrooms?
Sure. So the tax card currently says 5. So there's 5 bedrooms on the main floor, and then on the top floor, there are additional rooms that they've been using as bedrooms, but they don't have egress windows. The hallways are very long, so the fire marshal was saying that in order to use them as bedrooms, they would need to either widen the hallways, they'd need to put in egress windows, they'd need to put in emergency lighting. I can't remember if a sprinkler system would be required or not, but there were a bunch of infrastructure changes that would need to be made to those 3rd floor, or, you know, there's a basement and then a main floor and then a top floor. So those top floor bedrooms would have to have safety improvements made before they could be used as short-term rental bedrooms. The owner had expressed that he had no intention of doing that because it would be too expensive, but the entire summer he's been renting and advertising as 8 bedrooms, sleeping 16-plus people. Even though he applied for 6 people in 5 bedrooms, knowing he was not going to ever get approval for more than that, and yet that's how he's been renting it without consequence for the entire summer.
Yeah, well, that's not right.
Yeah.
Do you know what their septic system is sized for?
They have an 8-bedroom septic system.
Does this new law, does it take effect going forward? And everybody else, will people be grandfathered in?
So I've advised, the building official asked me that question recently, because I think it was just a month or 2 ago, someone came before the zoning board with this type of special use permit application, and the zoning board granted the application and imposed conditions. In my opinion, that approved, and I don't recall the numbers, but it was a special use permit for occupancy by more than 3 unrelated individuals. In my opinion, those conditions are unenforceable now because state law says we have to allow 1 per bedroom up to a maximum of 5. So this is immediately effective and supersedes the definition in our zoning ordinance. I don't think it, as I said, I don't think it voids the special use permit option. That's just my opinion.
But without the special use permit, nobody can be grandfathered in. They have to abide by the new law. Meaning no more than 5. If there's an 8-bedroom home and
Yeah.
they've been using it for 8 bedrooms for the last 20 years, can they still use it? Are they grandfathered in from, what do you say, the end of June,
I
when the
guess-
new law
Yeah.
took
Would the
place?
special use permit still be effective? If you already had it up to 8,
It's, if someone received a special use permit for occupancy by 8 unrelated individuals, that would still apply. Yeah.
Can I just say something? So the way the law is worded is the maximum number may be set by local ordinance. So unless we set a maximum number, there is no maximum number.
So what you're saying is we could set an ordinance that says the maximum number is 5 and there are no special use permits going forward.
Right, but I'm also saying that it can be any number unless the town decides to set the number at 5, right?
And I
No?
I don't agree with that interpretation, respectfully. I think it's.
Good, I'm glad.
It's 5?
it's 5. However, on the books, we have an option to allow special use permit that doesn't have a maximum number. That special use permit, and I'd have to review every word of it. I don't think it has, I think it does limit 2 per bedroom. So there is a per bedroom limit even on the special use permit option.
So do we have to wait for the planning board to come back and tell us to remove the special permit process, or can we just say, move in that direction?
You can direct the planning staff and legal counsel to prepare an amendment to whatever effect there's a council consensus on. I think, as we did last year, it may be more efficient for us to come to you with one, at one time. And I would think the fall, some of the laws, like the law on inclusionary zoning, don't take effect until January 1st. Some of them, like the accessory dwelling unit law, which I think will have a significant and tremendous impact, that's effective already. That supersedes what we have in our zoning ordinance on accessory apartments. And I think there are going to be a lot of inquiries on ADUs and tiny houses going forward. So there are tiers of urgency on the recently enacted land use legislation. I would call this a priority, but it does have to go through that process with it has to be drafted, studied by the planning board, and then advertised for a public hearing. You can make that motion tonight just to direct staff to move in a certain direction.
So if you're talking about removing the mechanism of granting a special use permit to increase it beyond 5, I think it's a little premature to go that far right now. I just didn't know what you were thinking.
What about if it was 1 per legal bedroom?
That's what the law
That's
says.
what the law says
Up
already.
to 5.
Oh, but what if there was 8 legal bedrooms?
Then it's capped at 5, absent a special use permit.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have a huge concern about not having a cap on it, because if you say you can have up to 1 person per legal bedroom, what's to stop people from putting in 12-bedroom septic systems and adding on 12 bedrooms? Or in Middlebridge, where they're on sewer, there's no limit, right? Theoretically, to how many bedrooms you can put on
I think the way the law is now, it's 1 per bedroom,
Right, but if
not
you're
to exceed 5 in the total dwelling,
Right, but
even
if
if
you're
there's
talking
more than
about
5 bedrooms.
special use permit, allowing more with the special use permit up to the number of bedrooms, then you're potentially off to the races as far.
But it wouldn't be as a matter of right. They would have to
Right.
come before the zoning board and get permission. And,
Okay.
I don't think this council or any council is going to put the number that high.
The way the special use permit mechanism works, it's not like you have automatic ability to add as many as you want. You have to come forward with a specific plan. Can you walk us through that?
The special use permit, like any request for relief before the zoning board, is advertised to abutters within 200 feet of the subject property. It's advertised for a public hearing, and the application, the zoning board can't grant the application unless all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed with respect to satisfying all of the specific criteria.
So then it begs the question, how are they able to rent to 16 people for the entire summer? And what are the recourse available to any resident who objects to them operating without the right permits?
The town must have a mechanism to enforce that.
Perfect segue. Jamie Gorman, come on up.
So with respect to this property, I believe it was probably close to 8 months ago that a lease was originally before you. Notice of violation was issued to the property owner. Since then, they have installed a well, and they do now have potable water supply. With respect to the number of bedrooms, they do have a new 8-bedroom design septic. And I believe recently, within 3 months, they did apply for the legalization of the additional 3 bedrooms on the upper story through a building permit, as well as the fire marshal's review. So they did install the windows, although I don't know if that has been finally CO'd, essentially. But they were in the midst of the process of obtaining the planning board and zoning board approvals. But my understanding is that they were seeking to legalize the 8-bedroom, and I believe they've satisfied the building code for doing so.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Any questions, bro?
They don't have it as of right, though. It still has to go to zoning to get 3 additional bedrooms,
Well,
or
as a-
5.
As a single-family dwelling, we wouldn't be able to prohibit them from adding bedrooms. So if it were going to be, the unrelated is the mechanism for the special use permit. So certainly if they were going to have more than, at this point, 5, then they'd have to obtain that, yeah, certainly.
Historically speaking, I don't know what you're familiar with the special use permits, but are they typically granted? Is it just, Amy's nodding over here, so I feel like here's a very difficult situation. The neighbors are clearly not happy to live next to a short-term rental and a URI rental and all of this stuff, and it's like you're SOL?
I believe the process, the planning board does the heavy lifting through development plan review and conditions of approval with regard to parking, activities, stipulations that, as well as buffering. I think those conditions are incorporated with the zoning board's approval typically, but yes, they're usually, I can't remember one that was denied.
Would the zoning board get a letter from maybe you, I'm not sure who, saying that they have not been adhering to the rules?
I've never made a staff recommendation, but we did issue the notice of violation and they've made the adjustments and the corrections, although when it was listed as a 8-bedroom, I'd have to verify that, whether or not they had legal, if it was 5 bedrooms at that point, or if it was legally 8 bedrooms.
Yeah, for the council's information, we don't do staff reports in South Kingstown for the zoning board, but the building zoning official is always available to answer any questions, and typically it's neighbors who bring these enforcement issues to the zoning board's attention. So I should, yes, the ones I've seen applied for have all been granted. They typically don't have a similar history as this property does. That all those, I would expect, just like any zoning board application, all the relevant facts are brought to the zoning board's attention.
And that will be July 17th?
So I believe there was original notice sent. No, we'd have to verify. They requested continuation from June's hearing. So
I guess regardless of whether this neighbor is here or not, it's still confusing to me that they were able to do a short-term rental with 16 people when they don't have a special use permit, and there's no stopping them. And there's no...
How do you enforce that?
Yeah,
with regard to the short-term rental,
yeah.
Let's say they got 16 people unrelated. They got the special use up to 8, they got 16 in there. How do you prevent them from doing it?
we'd have to identify, are they related or not? If we were to do, if they're renting it for a weekend, it's difficult to show up. Usually it's a police response, but...
So they'll never let you in the house, right? So you wouldn't be able to go in and see. So what other way is there?
Regarding the 16
Hypothetical.
individuals.
It could be
Special use permit granted, now they're allowed 8 people, but they actually have 16 in the house. They're all unrelated, they're all in there, living there. How do you enforce that? It's a violation of the law. You're the building official. I'm asking you, how do you enforce it?
I mean, we haven't received that complaint yet, but it's difficult. It's very difficult, to be honest with you. Oftentimes there's girlfriends or significant others staying with them where they're not on the lease agreement, but we require a lease, them to provide a lease with the names of the individuals. And, you know, obviously relation can tend to be difficult even with names. But for short-term rentals, if it's a transient basis, they may be there for 3 days, and to identify if it's a family or an extended family is near impossible.
Is the burden on us to prove a violation? It is, okay. All right.
When I was in Narragansett town manager, I asked to go out with the building inspector to see how enforcement went. And being in law enforcement all those years, it's pretty black and white, those laws, but not these. This was nearly impossible to enforce. And it's because there's Fourth Amendment rights. You know, you can't just go into a house, right? Illegal search and seizure. You can't go in and just look around like it's a crime, because it's really not. It's a violation. And, but I don't know if the laws were meant to be this vague, but they are. And it's very tough for a building inspector to figure it out. Like Jamie said, I think the intent is with the 5 unrelated, you can't, if you have 5 bedrooms, you have 5 people renting a bedroom, and that's it. But does the law prohibit them from having a guest stay over in one of the bedrooms? So that's where the problem occurs. We have homes that could have 5 bedrooms, but you could have 10 vehicles out there. You have 5 people renting the bedrooms, and they all have a guest. So these are all things I meet with Jamie quite often, because as we're ramping this up and trying to find out how this town will enforce it and how we can do it, we're trying to get all the options available to the town council, make policy decisions, but it's not easy, is the answer.
All right.
So before you, so then what's the role of the municipal court and the housing court? If I feel like we're looking to Jamie and he doesn't have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and then we have this court that doesn't seem to have any tools in the toolbox. So what's the point?
No, there are tools. There's definitely tools. I mean, we're giving you extreme circumstances here, right? You got noise ordinances. You've got loud. You've got parties. You've got unruly behavior. You have all that, but it's not perfect. It's not black and white.
Right.
I mean, you think about how are you going to enforce who's in that house if they're not letting you in there? No one let us in. When we were in Narragansett trying to get in these houses, say, can I see the lease? How many people are here? Why are all these vehicles here? No one would let you in, not one. They're all schooled on how to act by the property owners.
But I mean, I can see this as like a bachelorette weekend, a wedding, something or other, I mean, it just sounds awful. Like literally, I would not want to live there because of.
You could count the plates, you can count the vehicles, count the plates. Are they all out-of-state plates? Are they, I mean, there are ways to do it, but I'm just saying it's not easy to do it. It's not clear-cut.
And for the transient population, the short-term rentals, we do have the registry, and we are working with the police department. If they're responding to a call, we're logging that complaint.
So our advice to any resident would be contact the police. We're going to start to document things, and eventually you're going to drag them into housing court?
Document it with the police.
Yeah.
Noise, excessive vehicles, something unruly going on. Then the building inspectors, the enforcement people that they have one right now, but we're going to need more in the future. And they would investigate it. Mm-hmm. But it has to be some type of documentation.
So are we documenting over here an 8-bedroom, 16 people? Have the police been responding? Have they been called?
What?
Haven't what? I can't hear you.
So far, we haven't had a need this summer.
Okay.
But our intent is to definitely, yes.
I also want the council to be aware, we've had, I'll say, a handful, maybe more than a handful over the last several years since that special use permit option was adopted, where the building official would send out a notice of violation, you know, something to the effect, we've received information that there are more than 3 unrelated people that are residing in your dwelling. The way to cure that violation is to apply for the special use permit. And I think a number of the special use permits that the zoning board has granted have been a result of the owner receiving a notice of violation. So sometimes the property owners are, you know, doing the right thing per se. Yeah, municipalities all over the state have the same enforcement difficulties with this.
All right.
So just, I guess it's confusing. We know who this person is who owns this 8-bedroom house and doing all this, and we know their advertising's for 16. Why wouldn't we say, you are creating this big kerfuffle. We don't want you to be in this situation. Please don't do this.
So I believe they've been cooperative in attending the meetings for the approval process. So if they do have the 8-bedroom and the septic is designed for that, then essentially they could have 16 people, a family residing there, staying there, and still be in compliance with the building code and the zoning ordinance.
Do we have like a rooming house ordinance? Like, don't we have that? What? It's not that. It's not called that.
Well, rooming houses are prohibited, but that was brought up during the review process for this particular property. And if they're renting individual rooms, so in this case, the tenants have the whole house as under the lease, so it's a shared home. If you have individual rooms with like a keyed access, that would fit the bill for a rooming house. That's prohibited.
Okay. And then do we have any like parking? Like, can they have 16 cars all over their lawn? Is there any ordinance for that? There's nothing for that. You can just run a parking lot.
They have to have sufficient off-street parking per the zoning ordinance. And the zoning board, by the way, is, I think, bound to consider the history of police response and complaints, if any.
It's, as we're getting into this more, and we're trying to figure out what regulations the town council will be looking at for short-term rentals, you could have something like this. If you have a 5-bedroom, you need to have 5 parking spots. Can't park on lawns, can't park on the street or whatever. That's how other municipalities have been getting around this. That's why there's no one answer to this that we can give you in tonight. It's going to be something we have to study, and we have to find out what's really going on out there. But all I'm saying is it's very difficult to enforce no matter what.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Amy. At least this has been a good discussion. I hope this allows us, further understanding of what the law says and the challenges it poses to us, but definitely opportunity to learn more what's happening in the town and be able to address it going forward. That's sort of our goal with the short-term rental registration. And if there's any concerns with the property, just make sure to call police and hopefully they'll be remedied. Thank you. All right.
Where are we going with this? I mean, is there going to be some set meeting or, I mean, right now it's just left up in the air as far as I'm concerned.
No, we have, in the past we've discussed, first of all, once the short-term rentals, we keep using this term, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we don't know how many short-term rentals we have. We don't know how many of these houses we have like this right now. So we need to gather that info, and I think the date the council used was December, so that everyone is registered in short-term rentals. Then we will get that data and try and figure out where do we go with this. Come back with recommendations. If the town is 1/3 rentals, do you want a homestead? Do you want a 2-tier tax rate? Like, do you want that type of big policy decisions? What type of regulations, if any, do you want to impose on these rentals? But we need to gather the info now first, so we can come back with data. That's what we're doing now.
And Amy had also mentioned coming back to us with a package for how we have to adapt our ordinances.
I think at this time, it would be appropriate for the council to direct staff and legal counsel to begin working on amendments as required. And I think the time frame for that would be the fall, that something would be ready for the council for a public hearing. That, I think, is the minimum amount of time that's needed for the planning board to study all of these new laws and come up with recommendations for the council.
And to schedule a public hearing. So moved.
All right, we got a motion.
Second?
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. All right, we're gonna move on to communication 11B, an email dated July 2, 2024 from Kevin Pellissier, tendering his resignation from the Zoning Board of Review effective immediately.
I move that we accept Kevin Pellissier's resignation and direct the town clerk to thank him for his service.
Second?
We got a motion, we have a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. It's gonna bring us to item 12A, appointments.
I make a resolution to appoint David Bowd back to the Zoning Board of Review. I make Rainey Puzo to the EDC, reappoint Tim Murphy to the Library Board of Trustees, reappoint Terry Murphy to the trustees of the South Kingstown, what did I say, Terry Murphy? Terry Simpson, I'm getting later, to the reappointment to the trustees of the South Kingstown School Funds, and reappoint Nate Merrill to the Waterfront Advisory.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, we got one more on there. One more item on there.
Twelve B.
Read it. I motion to approve 12B.
Second?
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes.
Motion to adjourn, sorry.
Second?
Motion to adjourn a second. Any discussion? Are we sure about this one?